Before we start, a quick note about what this channel is and what it isn't. This isn't a recap channel, and it's not a highlight reel. We're here for the parts of Panem that happen after the cameras turn away, the systems behind the games, the contracts hidden inside victory, the lives that keep unfolding long after the anthem ends. Each video on this channel is built to slow things down, to follow the logic the capital relies on, the details it hopes you won't connect, and the people who live with the consequences year after year. If that's the kind of Hunger Games analysis you're looking for, you're in the right place. Subscribing just means you'll keep a seat here when we move on to the next story. Now, let's start where Panem always wants you to stop paying attention. Haymitch's bottle hits the table. Liquid sloshes. And you have to ask yourself, how did this man with a bottle become more dangerous than any tribute with a sword? At face value, he's the punchline of District 12. The drunk mentor. The guy passed out on the train while Effie talks about schedules. But here's the real question. If he's so useless, why is President Snow terrified enough to murder his entire family after the 50th games and still keep him alive? Why not just get rid of him? You think back to that second quarter Quell, twice the tributes, an arena that's supposed to be a spectacle, a joke at the district's expense. The capital calls it a celebration. So why does that arena end with a teenager from the seam turning the force field itself into a weapon? Why does the fun twist accidentally manufacture the one victor who breaks the game's code? Because the real story of Haymitch isn't how did he win, it's how did he beat the system running the games, and then get a front row seat to it for the next 25 years. That part matters, because once you see what he actually did with that force field, the bottle in his hand stops being a prop and starts looking more like camouflage. On the surface, he's a mess. He stumbles through the reaping, he mouths off to sponsors. He seems to have given up on every tribute from his district. Any victor will tell you the games don't end when you win. But with Haymitch, it looks worse. It looks like he lost the moment he stepped off the train. Underneath, something else is happening. This is the only victor we ever see who turns the arena itself into his weapon. He studies the boundary, tests it with a thrown rock, and then, in that final showdown, lets the career's axe rebound off the force field and kill its owner. He doesn't just outfight another tribute. He exposes the arena's design as exploitable, turns the capital's own technology back on them, and survives to tell the story. So why is he still breathing? Why does Snow allow the one person who proved the games are hackable to become a mandatory part of them as a mentor? This is where we talk about the real danger. The capital doesn't just have a rogue victor, it has a rogue system analyst sitting in Victor's village with decades of access. There is a lot to uncover here, because if Snow had really understood what Haymitch did with that force field, Katniss's arena never would have looked the way it did. Maybe there is no Mockingjay. Maybe there is no rebellion. In the next section, we're going to cover how a joke quarter Quell twist accidentally created the capital's worst long-term problem. Winning wasn't the end. The hidden stakes of letting Haymitch live. So here's the twist the capital didn't plan for. Winning Haymitch's quarter Quell didn't close his file. It opened a permanent tab. Back in the early games, the logic was simple. You throw 24 kids into an arena, you get one brutal spectacle, one traumatized victor, and then the story is over. The capital sends them home as a walking advertisement. This is what hope looks like, and this is what it costs. At face value, Haymitch should have slotted neatly into that pattern. He won. He was pretty. He was from a poor district. Perfect propaganda material. But here's the real question. If he was supposed to be a trophy, why does Snow treat him like a problem that keeps needing new solutions? Why murder his mother, his little brother, and his girlfriend in a targeted sweep no other victor gets? Why keep him alive after he publicly exposes the arena's force field, basically pointing at the code under the games and saying, "I see you"? Why not quietly retire him, drug him, or stage an accident the minute he becomes inconvenient? This is where we talk about the hidden stakes of letting him walk out of that arena breathing. Because the second Haymitch beats the force field, the games stop being a one-time event and turn into a long game of containment. The capital is suddenly stuck with a victor who has proof the arena isn't a god's playground. It's a machine with limits. And he's the only person in his district who knows exactly where one of those limits snapped. For most tributes, the games end when the cannon sounds. You win, you get your crown, you move into Victor's village, and the rest of your life is about surviving nightmares and talk shows. But for Haymitch, the real game starts after he's crowned. Now he has knowledge. He has leverage. He has a front row seat to every new arena for decades, watching how the capital adapts, what tech they reuse, how sponsors react to different narratives. Every year he mentors, he isn't just sending kids to die, he's collecting data. And that part matters because information in Panem is more dangerous than any weapon. By the time Katniss arrives, Haymitch has seen more games than most peacekeepers. He understands the relationship between spectacle and punishment, between a district's morale and a victor's storyline. Each tribute cycle makes him exponentially more dangerous, not less, because he can compare this mutation here, that force field there, this shift in sponsor behavior when the capital is nervous. So why does Snow keep him on the board as a mentor instead of erasing him? Because the system needs its victors visible to sell the promise of winning. Pull Haymitch out and District 12 starts asking why. Leave him in and you gamble that alcohol and grief will blunt his edge. There is a lot to uncover here, but the core is this. Haymitch isn't just a threat to other tributes. He's a slow burn threat to the entire structure of the games themselves, which is exactly why his story ends up mattering far beyond one broken district. In the next section, we're going to cover how that harmless drunk persona becomes his best weapon, turning mentorship into a long-term assassination of the capital's control. Our lens on Haymitch, the angle that changes everything. So if Haymitch is quietly assassinating the games from the mentor's chair, we need to say the quiet part out loud. Our core claim is this. Haymitch is more dangerous than any tribute because he stops playing as a piece on the board and starts thinking like a game designer. And then, even worse for the capital, as a saboteur of the entire system. At face value, you're told he's the comic relief drunk from a forgotten district. But here's the real question. What happens when you treat him not as a punchline, but as the only person in Panem who has beaten the Hunger Games twice, once in his own arena, and then for decades from the outside? This is where we talk about our lens. We're going to cover Haymitch as a single continuous operation. The boy who hacked the 50th quarter Quell, the mentor who weaponizes every rule, and the rebel operative who turns victors into live grenades. To do that, we're anchoring on 3 pillars of danger. First, weaponized intelligence. Haymitch doesn't just survive a forest with twice the usual tributes, he reverse engineers the arena itself. He notices the force field, tests its rebound with a thrown rock, then turns a career's axe into a boomerang execution. That part matters because it's not brute strength, it's pattern reading and game breaking. He sees the invisible architecture of the games, and once you see architecture, you can start looking for load-bearing walls. Second, psychological warfare. Haymitch's real arena is people. He manipulates allies by withholding information until it hurts enough to stick. He plays enemies by acting harmless, slurring his words while he maps out their pressure points. He even manipulates the capital audience, drip-feeding just enough spectacle through Katniss and Peter's star-crossed relationship to keep sponsors paying without realizing they're funding a rebellion asset. You think he's chaotic. He's actually running long-form social engineering. Third, institutional power. No tribute, no matter how deadly, gets what Haymitch has: a permanent mentor seat, a direct line to sponsors, routine access to capital officials, and eventually a role inside the rebellion's inner circle. He is the broker between district and capital, between Snow's narrative and coins. A single arena killer can win 1 year. Haymitch can quietly influence every games he touches, and all of that is wrapped in his greatest camouflage, the washed-up drunk persona. The capital underestimates him. His own tributes underestimate him. You probably did too. That's the point. By looking broken, he stops attracting preemptive fire. Snow doesn't disappear him the way you'd expect for someone who once turned a force field against the capital, because on paper, he's already neutralized by grief and alcohol. There is a lot to uncover here. The joke, twist of the 50th games, the force field trick, the decades of mentoring, both of Katniss's games, and the brutal personal cost of staying this dangerous. So next, we're going to cover how the 50th quarter Quell didn't just crown a victor, it accidentally forged a systems-level weapon the capital could never fully control, from arena hack to rebellion architect. What we're unpacking today. So here's how we're going to untangle all of that, because Haymitch's danger level really spikes once you see the whole arc instead of just the drunk in the corner. First, we're going straight back to the arena. This is where we talk about the 50th Hunger Games, the so-called fun quarter Quell, where the capital literally doubles the body count as a spectacle. At face value, it's a joke twist. Twice the tributes, twice the blood. But here's the real question. Why did that specific rule change create the perfect conditions for a system-breaking victor? When you cram in extra career packs, extra alliances, extra chaos, you also create more moving parts for someone smart enough to read patterns. We're going to cover how Haymitch maps the force field, tests it, and then turns the arena's own boundary into a weapon that kills the final career for him, and why that quiet, rules lawyer victory terrified the capital more than any flashy kill count ever could. Then we move into the long middle of his life, where the games never actually stop. This is where we talk about the evolution from traumatized teenager to master mentor. Why does the man who can barely stand up straight somehow pull sponsors in exactly when Katniss and Peter need them most? We'll break down how decades of sending District 12 kids to their deaths teaches him the capital's rhythms, which arena patterns repeat, which hazards are distractions, how sponsor money really flows. We'll look at concrete moments like that perfectly timed burn cream, or the way he nudges Katniss into the star-crossed lover's narrative as evidence that he's not guessing. He's programming the story. From there, we shift into psychological warfare, because the drunk routine, that part matters because it's camouflage. We'll ask why a man who cares enough to keep them alive also lies to Katniss and Peter, withholds the existence of the rebellion, and emotionally corners them into playing out his strategy. Is that cruelty, or is it the only way to move pieces the Capitol is always watching? There is a lot to uncover here about his relationship to truth, to hope, and to the tributes he turns into weapons the Capitol never saw coming. After that, we'll zoom out to the meta level. We're going to cover book versus movie Haymitch and how adaptation softens his edges. Why does the film skip the murder of his family, compress his mentoring history, and lean harder on the comic relief? We'll talk about how those choices change our sense of how dangerous he really is, and whether the on-screen version could plausibly scare Snow the way the book version does. And finally, we're ending with a what if. What does Panem look like if Snow kills Haymitch right after the 50th games? Does another victor ever pull off the same long game? Or is there a reason no one else breaks the system at that scale? By the end, you'll be able to track how one lucky victor quietly becomes more dangerous than any tribute who ever stepped into the arena, and how close the Capitol came to stopping him before Katniss was even born. Why? This channel obsessively rereads Haymitch's every move. And this is exactly where the channel obsession kicks in, because when you hear one lucky victor quietly becomes more dangerous than any tribute, our whole thing is to pause the spectacle and ask, dangerous? How? And to whom? On this channel, we're going to cover the parts of the Hunger Games that the Capitol would absolutely cut from the highlight reel. Arena design tricks, mentor psychology, and the political machinery humming under every single cannon. If you're new here, this is where we talk about the details you half remember and the ones you maybe never noticed. Why does a drunk from District 12 get a direct phone line to the Capitol? Why does his house sit at the edge of Victor's village, rotting, when at face value it should be a promise of comfort and safety? Why does one force field test in the 50th games rewrite the relationship between victors and the arena forever? There is a lot to uncover here, and Haymitch is basically our perfect case study. We zoom in on things the films glide past, the wording of the quarter quells, Snow's tiny tells in conversation, the way the cameras cut away right before something important happens. Then we stitch it back together to see what Panem is actually doing, not just what the broadcast wants you to see. That part matters because the story keeps insisting the games are about chance and courage, while the subtext keeps whispering that they're really about systems and strategy. If you've been around the channel for a while, you've already seen how this connects. We've broken down the other quarter quells, we've gone into Snow's "A Little Hope is Effective" speech, we've walked through why Victor's village is more prison than paradise. Haymitch sits at the crossroads of all of that. He's the victor who lives in the village, mentors through 2 quells, and then quietly helps turn the games into open rebellion. So if you enjoy this kind of lore-heavy breakdown, where we treat a throwaway line about a force field or a phone call as evidence in a political thriller, this is your arena. Stick around, hit subscribe if you want more of this, and drop into the Victor's Village-style community we've got going here. It's the one place you're actually rewarded for overthinking a 3-second reaction shot. Quick pattern interrupt before we dive back in. Everyone remembers Katniss spinning out of the arena in a blazing hovercraft rescue. But here's the real question. How did Haymitch, decades earlier, get away with using the arena itself as a weapon without being accidentally killed on the spot? To really understand why the capital should have feared him more than any career, we have to rewind back to the one arena the capital wishes everyone would forget. The 50th quarter Quell, how a fun twist forged a system breaker. The 50th quarter Quell is where the Hunger Games quietly broke their own rules. Back then, we're about 24 years before Katniss ever volunteers, before mockingjays on pins or arrows into force fields. The games are already a ritual, already a promise from the capital to the districts. We can do whatever we want to you, forever. A quarter Quell is the anniversary version of that promise. Every 25 years, they add a fun twist, something that at face value is supposed to deepen the punishment and keep the spectacle fresh. For the second quarter Quell, they reaped 4 tributes from each district. For the third, they'd eventually drag victors back in. But this is where we talk about the 50th, the capital's grand idea: double the tributes. 48 kids, twice the fear, twice the blood, twice the ratings. On paper, that twist should erase someone like Haymitch before the games even start. District 12 sends a scrawny 16-year-old into an arena now overflowing with career packs from 1, 2, and 4. Not one disciplined group, but several, all armed, all trained, all eager to hunt the weak. The arena itself looks generous. A lush green valley, fruit trees, flowers, a blue sky that almost feels honest. But you know how this works. If the capital makes something look safe, it's because they've buried the danger somewhere you're not looking. There is a lot to uncover here. The environment is studded with hidden traps, mutts, and that infamous shimmering boundary. Statistically, Haymitch should be dead in the bloodbath or picked off in the first week by a career bored enough to finish the job. That part matters because the design is supposed to reward brute force and clean alliances, not patience and quiet pattern reading. From the capital's perspective, the math is simple. More tributes means more alliances, more betrayals, more chaos. You cram 48 desperate kids into one ecosystem and let social physics do the rest. Why would they ever anticipate a tribute who treats that chaos as data? Who watches how the arena responds, how the weather shifts, how the hovercrafts appear, and starts asking the wrong kind of question, not how do I survive inside this system, but how does this system actually work? Haymitch becomes the outlier in real time. He's not the strongest fighter. He's not even the most charismatic. What he is observant and stubborn. He refuses the usual relationship to the arena where the force field is a god and the rules are sacred. Instead, he does something incredibly stupid or incredibly smart, depending on your angle. He walks toward the edge. Here's the real question. What happens when a tribute doesn't just accept the horizon line as death, but tests it? Haymitch throws an object toward that distant shimmer and watches it rebound, violently, back into the arena. In that moment, he realizes the force field isn't just a wall. It's a weapon the capital thinks only they control. And once a tribute understands that the arena itself can be turned, even for a second, against its creators, you can probably guess what he does with that axe at the very end. But the real consequences of that choice don't hit until after he wins. The force field trick, when Haymitch beat the game, not the tributes. So when that axe flies at Haymitch in the final showdown, you're not just watching a cool trick shot, you're watching the moment a tribute stops playing the games and starts rewriting them. And to see how dangerous that is, you have to go back to the edge of the arena. Haymitch reaches the tree line. Beyond it, nothing. Just blue sky and the illusion of freedom. He picks up a rock, throws it casually over the cliff, and it never falls. It hits something invisible, rebounds, and slams into the ground behind him. At face value, it's a weird oops force field moment. But here's the real question. Who throws a rock at the sky unless they're testing boundaries on purpose? Most tributes treat the arena as God-made. The game makers send mutts, you run. They spin the clock, you adapt. You're reacting to hazards, not questioning the code underneath. Haymitch does the opposite. There is a lot to uncover here, because what he's really doing is penetration testing the Capital's toy box. He's not just surviving the simulation, he's probing it, mapping it, asking, where does their power stop? That part matters because it's a totally different category of intelligence. A career knows how to swing an axe, a survivor knows how to find water. Haymitch wants to know why the axe stops here and not one step further. Why the arena curves this way, why the boundary is consistent enough that a rock lands in the same place every time. That's not hunting, that's reverse engineering. So when we get to the final kill, it isn't a lucky break, it's a premeditated exploit. Haymitch positions himself right at that invisible edge, back to the void, apparently cornered. The last career sees a desperate, exhausted boy with nowhere to go and charges, axe raised. This is where we talk about misdirection. Haymitch isn't trapped, he's bait. The axe comes down, Haymitch twists aside at the last second. The blade slams into the force field, hits that same predictable barrier he tested with the rock, and ricochets straight back into its owner's skull. No mutts, no fireballs, no sponsor gift. The arena itself kills the Capital's golden tribute on command from a boy from District 12. Symbolically, that's brutal. The Capital designs arenas to feel omnipotent, a closed system where every variable belongs to them. Haymitch turns their godlike barrier into a boomerang. He proves the relationship between tribute and arena isn't fixed. If you understand the rules deeply enough, you can make the system hurt itself. On a code level, the games are hackable. And once one victor has done that, here's the real question for the Capital. How safe are you really running future games on the same kind of tech? If a 17-year-old under starvation and trauma can find a flaw, what happens when that victor has decades to study new arenas as a mentor? We're going to cover what the Capital does with that problem next. Snow's response. Why killing Haymitch's family made him more lethal. So the Capital's got a problem. A victor who's proven the games run on code, and that code can be hacked. What do you do with that? You can't just erase him. At face value, the easiest solution would be to quietly kill Haymitch and pretend the 50th never happened. But here's the real question. What happens when the only boy ever to outsmart a quarter Quell dies in a mysterious accident right after publicly humiliating the Capital on live television? You don't get peace, you get a legend. Snow understands that. He's running a system where stories are weapons. So instead of turning Haymitch into a martyr, he goes after something far more fragile. This is where we talk about the canon punishment almost everyone in universe knows about, but no one says out loud. After the victory tour, after Haymitch has already done the interviews and played the charming drunk, the Capital murders his younger brother, his girlfriend, not in the arena, not as random district casualties, as a message. Most victors get the same blunt threat: behave, or we hurt the people you love. With Haymitch, Snow skips the warning phase and jumps straight to the execution. There is a lot to uncover here, because that part matters, because it tells you exactly what Snow thought he was doing. He's not disciplining a troublesome tribute. He's trying to break a dangerous system error. From Snow's perspective, this is clean math. You leave Haymitch technically alive, so there's no martyrdom, no grave for kids in District 12 to visit. But you strip him of every attachment that could sustain rebellion. You turn his own victory into the reason his family dies, so every time he remembers beating the arena, he also remembers the cost. The relationship isn't "you defied us and won," it's "you defied us and everyone you love paid for it." So why does this backfire so hard? Because it teaches Haymitch the rule that will define the rest of his life. The capital will always escalate. There is no safe level of obedience, no clever compromise that protects your people. Once you know that, what exactly do you have left to lose? Suddenly his later persona snaps into focus. The alcoholism, the cynicism, the way he tears into Katniss and Peter during training. It reads as cruelty, self-destruction, laziness. But under Snow's punishment, it doubles as armor. If attachments get weaponized, you stop having attachments. If hope is a trap, you poison it before it can grow. Any victor will tell you the games don't end when you win. Haymitch learns a harsher version. The real arena is the years afterward, and the capital is always watching for leverage. So what happens when you take a man who understands the system's code, erase his illusions, and then force him to mentor tributes for decades Victor's village mansion? You get a saboteur in plain sight, and the capital hands him a front row seat to every new arena. The question is, when does he stop just surviving that job and start quietly turning it into his next hack? From victor to mentor, how Haymitch turned grief into a long game. So let's zoom out and do something the capital never wanted you to do. Put Haymitch on a timeline. He wins the 50th games as a teenager. By the 74th, when Katniss arrives, he's been mentoring for over 2 decades. That means every year, without fail, he's dragged back into a new arena, handed 2 terrified kids from the poorest district, and forced to watch the game's update in real time. At face value, that sounds static. Same job, same nightmare. But here's the real question. What happens when a pattern reader is forced to binge watch the system for 25 seasons straight? Year by year, he's collecting data no active tribute can touch. A kid in the arena only sees one map, one set of mutts, one style of traps. Haymitch sees the whole catalogue. Jungle with poison fog, frozen wasteland. Clock arena. He tracks how the mutts shift from crudely spliced wolves to psychologically targeted jabberjays. He notes when the terrain goes from simple obstacles to narrative devices the game makers use to steer the broadcast. There is a lot to uncover here, because he's not just remembering dangers, he's learning game maker psychology. This is where we talk about the data advantage. He watches which twists get applause in the capital and which ones land with that uncomfortable silence. He sees when they overcorrect after a boring year, when they panic after a rebellious gesture, when they quietly retire a type of torture that made the wrong people in the audience flinch. Every arena becomes a case study in the relationship between spectacle and control. On the surface, he leans into apathy. He's drunk, late, rude, falling off stages. But that part matters because the performance keeps the capital from asking why he's always watching so closely. While everyone writes him off, He's building a mental library of what the Capitol values on screen: romance, sacrifice, clever kills, and what they fear off screen: solidarity, martyrs, symbols they can't spin. And then there are sponsors. We're going to cover this as more than just parachutes. Over decades, Haymitch learns the Capitol audience the way he once learned the force field. He figures out which narratives sell: doomed lovers, underdog siblings, fiery defiance with just enough vulnerability to still feel marketable. He times gifts so they feel impossible, arriving at the exact second a tribute is about to die, turning a routine medicine drop into a miracle the whole Capitol cheers for. Here's the pattern interrupt. He's not just saving tributes. He's testing how far he can push the story engine. So by the time Katniss and Peter show up, the question isn't, can he get them sponsors? It's much bigger. What happens when someone with this much accumulated intel finally meets tributes stubborn enough, skilled enough, and angry enough to run a longer game? When the drunk in the Victor's Village mansion stops merely gaming the arena and starts wondering if the arena itself can be broken on purpose? Weaponized intelligence. Haymitch as the arena's offsite game maker. So when that drunk in the mansion finally decides the arena itself is the real target, something shifts. You start to notice that Haymitch isn't just mentoring tributes. He's quietly co-running the games from outside. At face value, Plutarch Heavensby is the game maker. He's in the control room, pushing buttons, spinning the arena. But here's the real question. What happens when someone on the outside can move people with almost the same precision? Haymitch can't trigger a firestorm, but he can trigger a sponsor. He can't spin the cornucopia, but he can spin a narrative in an interview, in training, in every whispered piece of advice on that metal table. This is where we talk about weaponized intelligence. Haymitch's real arena is made of patterns. He reads them in seconds. When Katniss shoots the apple out of the game maker's pig, he doesn't just see a temper problem. He sees marketable defiance, something the Capitol audience can't look away from. When Peter throws those weights and then casually plays the star-crossed lover in his interview, Haymitch locks in on two core strengths: precision and empathy as performance. So what does he do with that? He designs a strategy that flatters the Capitol's expectations while quietly turning them. The star-crossed lovers from District 12 inches is a joke on paper. It's Romeo and Juliet with worse costumes. But Haymitch understands the relationship between spectacle and rules. If the games promise romance, the Capitol will demand payoff. And if the Capitol demands payoff, the game makers can be forced to bend. That part matters because misdirection is Haymitch's favorite weapon. He lets Caesar Flickerman sell the pure romance version, all glitter and soft lighting, while he's using the same story as a knife at Snow's throat. The more the audience falls in love with Katniss and Peter, the harder it becomes to kill them both without sparking unrest in every district that's been starved of hope. Suddenly, a ridiculous rule change, two victors from the same district, doesn't come from kindness. It comes from Haymitch cornering the Capitol in public. Compare that to a single tribute's power. A tribute can kill opponents. Maybe they can win. Haymitch can alter the frame of the entire games. He turns a private survival story into a public referendum on mercy. He nudges rules midstream. He helps create a symbol that will echo far beyond the arena walls. A tribute might inspire a district. Haymitch helps inspire a rebellion. Watch how he does it with sponsor gifts in the 74th Games. The burn ointment doesn't just heal Katniss, its timing tells her, you did the right thing with Rue, the audience is with you. Lean into that. The bread from District 11 is both food and a message. Your act of respect changed another district's relationship to you and to the games. The broth for Peter, that's not charity. It's an instruction to play up the caretaking, to deepen the romance narrative right when it's starting to wobble. Every parachute is a coded note. A yes, a no, a do more of that. We're going to cover how far he's willing to push those codes in the quarter Quell, but the pattern is already clear. While tributes swing weapons, Haymitch rewrites the script they're trapped inside. The fool as assassin, Haymitch's drunk act, and psychological warfare. Every parachute is a coded note. A yes, a no, a do more of that. We're going to cover how he writes those codes, but first we have to talk about the mask that lets him get away with it. Because on the surface, Haymitch is a joke. He staggers onto the stage at the reaping, falls off the platform, slurs through the introductions. He cracks inappropriate jokes in front of cameras that are supposed to sell hope and spectacle. He's drinking on the train, in the viewing center, at the interviews. At face value, he's the worst mentor in Panem. That part matters because it encourages everyone, from Effie to the careers to President Snow himself, to file him under one word: harmless. But here's the real question. What happens when you treat a man who broke the games with a force field as if he's too drunk to stand? You talk in front of him. This is where we talk about cover. People filter themselves around power. They relax around fools. Capital stylists gossip in his presence. Other mentors complain about arena patterns and sponsor trends. Peacekeepers grumble about orders, about new surveillance in a district, about rumors of unrest. Why would you guard your tongue around the district drunk? Haymitch turns that into a weaponized information stream. He's running passive surveillance every time he lifts a bottle. And then there's what he does with his own tributes. He doesn't sit Katniss and Peter down for a clear, kind briefing. He withholds. He pushes. He needles Katniss's pride, insults Peter's chances, vanishes when they want comfort, and appears when they're desperate enough to listen. It reads as cruelty, but the reason it works is brutal. He's shaping performances, not personalities. He needs a girl on fire and a boy in love, not two teenagers clinging to the illusion that the games are fair. He is absolutely willing to be hated if it keeps them alive. That's a mentor using emotional distance as armor and as a scalpel. Sponsor mind games are where you really see the assassin at work. Haymitch understands the Capitol's relationship to its own audience. They want to feel clever for spotting the romance. So he feeds them just enough ambiguity that they can argue about it at parties. They want to promise that their favorites are special, so he times parachutes to reward specific behaviors. The kiss, the confession, the protective gesture. On the surface, he's flattering them. Underneath, he's financing rebellion assets and training a symbol Snow can't easily kill. But there is a lot to uncover here, because the same traits that make him effective, emotional detachment, deception, calculated cruelty, are also symptoms of someone deeply damaged. Where is the line between protector and abuser when your entire job is to send children into an arena you once hacked open yourself? And if the fool act is an assassin's disguise, what happens the moment the Capitol realizes the joke has always been on them? So if the Joker's always been on the Capitol, here's the real question. Who is Haymitch actually killing once he's out of the arena? Because the mentor role seems harmless at face value. You drink, you watch, you send some bread. But this is where we talk about what a mentor really is in these games. An off-site assassin. They decide who gets combat training and who's pushed toward camouflage, who's encouraged to seek an alliance, and who's told to stay solo, you'll just slow them down. That part matters because every choice quietly nudges one tribute toward survival and another toward an early canon. Think about the 74th games. On screen, you're focused on Katniss firing arrows and Peter with the camouflage. But Haymitch is the one choosing which injuries get sponsor aid. He burns capital, literally, to send that burn cream after the firestorm. He holds back medicine until Peter's infection becomes a spectacle worth betting on. Every parachute he sends to their tree or their cave is one he's not sending to some dying kid from another district who might have outlasted them. So, whose death is that, really? We're going to cover something even colder. Haymitch also shapes the narrative sponsors see. He sells the star-crossed lover's story, not because he's a romantic, but because it turns Katniss and Peter into a single investment. That means two tributes get food, drugs, and protection at the cost of every other unmarketable tribute. A smart, quiet kid from District 3? A terrified 12-year-old from 10? They're not just unlucky, they're casualties of Haymitch's marketing strategy. By catching fire, the whole mentor as assassin thing scales up. The arena isn't a free-for-all anymore. It's a coordinated extraction mission. Haymitch has already pre-arranged alliances with Finnick, Beatty, Johanna, Wyress, and more before Katniss even steps on the sand. That's not mentoring, that's battlefield command. He knows where the force field is, who can break it, which victors will die protecting Katniss, and which ones are expendable in the larger plan. Again, who killed them? The Jabberjays, the Fog, or the man in Victor's village who decided their names belonged on a secret list? Here's the real question underneath all of this. Why is Haymitch doing it? The answer pulls us out of the arena entirely. He isn't just trying to manufacture a victor for District 12. He's trying to manufacture a symbol. Katniss isn't only a girl on fire. She's a weaponized narrative. Every sponsor he courts, every alliance he brokers, is aimed at destabilizing the Capitol's promise that the games are unbreakable. And that's why he's more dangerous than any tribute swinging a sword. A tribute kills to see tomorrow. Haymitch is running a multi-year assassination campaign against the games themselves. One arena at a time, one traumatized survivor at a time. The Capitol thought they'd chained him to a mentor's chair. So why does it start to feel by the quarter, Quell, like he's the one holding the leash? The 74th games, how Haymitch turned lovers into a loaded gun. And nowhere is that clearer than the 74th games. On paper, Haymitch is sending in a half-starved hunter from a non-career district and a baker's son who throws flour bags. The careers should eat them alive. But here's the real question. How do you turn two statistically doomed tributes into a story the Capitol can't afford to kill? His first move isn't weapons, it's casting. He clocks Peter's easy charm in the interviews, the way he can make a crowd lean forward. He sees Katniss's raw, unpolished honesty, that refusal to play nice even when she tries. At face value, that's a mismatch. One showman, one survivalist. But Haymitch reads the relationship potential immediately. If she's the reluctant hero and he's the boy who has always loved her, suddenly their odds aren't just about combat, they're about ratings. This is where we talk about the so-called star-crossed lovers line. Peter drops it on Caesar's stage, but that part matters because Haymitch doesn't shut it down. He amplifies it. On the train, in the prep, every time Katniss pushes back, he keeps steering her toward one brutal truth. The games are theatre. You don't have to feel it, you just have to sell it. So in the arena, he starts nudging the script. The bread from District 11 after Rue's death isn't just a kindness, it's a narrative pivot. You're watching a tribute honor a dead girl from another district, and another district answers with food. Why does that matter? Because it reframes Katniss from lone predator to shared symbol, and it links her emotionally to the viewers who are paying for every parachute. Then there's the cave. Katniss wants medicine, Haymitch sends soup, then more food. Then, finally, the life-saving salve when she's desperate enough to lean into the romance. We're going to cover sponsor mechanics more later, but notice the choreography. Each gift arrives at maximum story value, not maximum survival value. He withholds the cure until the Capitol has gotten the footage it wants. Whispered confessions, kisses, the promise that one of them might have to die for the other. Why is he doing that? Because he's building a trap. When the rule change comes, two victors from the same district, Haymitch knows exactly what's happening. The Capitol is cashing in on the lovers. When they revoke it, they expose themselves. If they kill one, they destroy the romance they just spent hours of broadcast time monetizing. If they kill both, they break the promise of hope they dangled in front of every district child. Haymitch doesn't script the Nightlock moment beat by beat, but he's the one who walked them out onto that ledge. By forcing them deeper into the lover's narrative, he makes the double suicide threat the only move that feels true to the story. And once Katniss and Peter raise those berries, the Capitol blinks. On-air rule changes. A victor pair who openly defied the games and lived. Two kids who turned a death match into a relationship drama the regime lost control of. There is a lot to uncover here, because that ending doesn't just crown victors. It quietly breaks the game's absolute authority and plants a new question in every district. If one mentor can bend the rules this far, what happens when he starts planning for an actual uprising? The 75th quarter Quell. Haymitch's invisible alliance web. So when Snow announces the third quarter Quell twist, it sounds simple on paper. All existing victors go back in. Most people hear that and think punishment. Haymitch hears it and instantly upgrades the board. The arena isn't just another spectacle anymore, it's a battlefield in a larger war. At face value, his job is to get Katniss through a second round of the games. But here's the real question. What if the real objective isn't survival, but extraction? Watch how fast he pivots. The second that card is read, he doesn't waste time bargaining with the Capitol or pretending there's a loophole. He knows the only female victor from District 12 is Katniss. She is going in. So instead of fighting that, he starts building a plan around it. That part matters because it shows you his instinct. Accept the rule set, then break the system from inside. This is where we talk about his invisible alliance web. By catching fire, Haymitch has decades of relationships with other victors. Finnick from District 4, the Capitol's golden boy with way too much dirt on powerful people. Beatty from 3, the quiet genius who reads technology the way Haymitch reads people. Johanna from 7, angry enough at the Capitol to strip in an elevator just to make them uncomfortable. On the surface, they're just competitors. Underneath, they're the backbone of a pact. Protect Katniss at all costs. Notice who keeps mysteriously choosing her. Finnick saves Peter's life with CPR. Johanna attacks Katniss in the elevator, but later risks everything to get her to the tree. Beatty conveniently has a plan involving the force field, the exact kind of weak point Haymitch once weaponized himself. None of this is random. We're going to cover the mechanics of the arena later, but for now, you can see the pattern. These are Haymitch's people moving on a signal Katniss never fully hears, and that's intentional. His greatest tool here is information control. Why doesn't he just tell Katniss the whole escape plan? Because the Capitol is already obsessed with her. Every expression, every hesitation, every off-script word is being monitored for signs of rebellion. If she knows too much, she can give too much away. Her authenticity and unpredictability are a shield. She can't leak what she doesn't know. Haymitch, meanwhile, is the bridge. On one side, Plutarch Heavensby and the rebel game makers quietly sabotaging the games from the control room. On the other, the tributes in the arena trusting Haymitch enough to follow half-explained orders. He's coordinating timing, sponsor gifts, and coded messages in an environment where a single wrong glance could mean mass execution, not just for victors, but for entire districts and the hidden promise of District 13. And the risk? If any of this web is exposed, the Capitol doesn't just kill a few troublesome victors, they destroy the Mockingjay, prove that rebellion is suicide, and gain the perfect excuse to crush every whisper of hope. So how do you run a revolution through an arena designed to kill you on live television and still make it look accidental? Why the Capitol let him live, fear, hope, and the Haymitch paradox, and still make it look accidental? Here's the real question. If Snow even suspects Haymitch is helping to run that web, why is this man still breathing? This is the victor who turned a force field into a weapon, survived a double-sized quarter Quell, and then coached the star-crossed lovers who broke the games. So why doesn't the Capitol just arrange a quiet train accident? At face value, the answer should be fear. Haymitch humiliates the system twice. First, when he bounces that axe off the arena's edge. Then when his tributes outmaneuver the rulebook with berries and a love story. Snow clearly recognizes the threat. The Capitol's response after his own victory is brutal and personal. They don't just punish him with public discipline. They murder his mother, his brother, his girlfriend. That part matters because it tells you Snow's instinct is to erase problems at the root. So why stop there? Why let him live when he's already proven he can break an arena's code? This is where we talk about Snow's favorite equation, fear versus hope. Remember his conversation with Seneca Crane. A little hope is effective. A lot of hope is dangerous. The games need a promise. One victor, one mansion. One example that tells every district child, if you're chosen, you might survive. You can't sell that promise if the most famous victor from the seam mysteriously drops dead. Haymitch becomes the perfect twisted advertisement. He's proof the system works, and proof that it ruins you. When you see him staggering through District 12, drunk in his decayed Victor's village house, the Capitol wants you to think, yes, you can win, but you'll be shattered, watched, and alone. He's a moving warning label. And as long as he looks broken, he's useful. There is a lot to uncover here, because that usefulness is exactly what lets him slip under the radar. Snow reads the public version of Haymitch, the man who vomits on the train, who insults Capitol hosts, who appears to care more about his bottle than his tributes. What Snow underestimates is the weaponized intelligence underneath. The pattern-reading kid who once tested a force field with a rock is now testing people, cameras, and narratives. We're going to cover how by the time Katniss enters the arena, Haymitch has already shifted his win condition. He's not playing for himself anymore. He's playing for the system's collapse. That's the real paradox. Kill him, and you risk a martyr, a victor whose murdered family and mysterious death could ignite the districts. Keep him, and you hand the rebellion a mentor with decades of arena data, sponsor control, and a direct relationship with your most volatile tribute. Snow gambles that fear will outweigh hope, that a miserable victor is safer than a dead legend. But what happens when the drunk in the big empty house starts manufacturing exactly the kind of hope the Capitol can't control? The cost of being dangerous: trauma, alcohol, and moral fallout. Haymitch starts manufacturing hope. Sure, but it's running on fumes. Any victor will tell you the games don't end when you win. With Haymitch, they never even slow down. You have the arena itself, that nightmare quarter Quell with double the tributes and a force field he turns into a weapon. Then the Capitol murders his mother, his little brother, his girlfriend. That part matters because it's not just punishment, it's calibration. They're teaching him exactly what it costs to be clever in Panem. So when you see him in District 12, drunk in that big empty house, you're not just looking at laziness or apathy. You're looking at a man who has been told very clearly that any attachment he forms can be erased over and over for decades. Every year he trains 2 more children, watches them enter the arena, and most of the time he watches them die. We're going to cover his strategy, but this is where we talk about the toll of running that strategy on repeat. Here's the real question. How do you stay dangerous to the Capitol when the thing you're best at keeps getting children killed right in front of you? At face value, the alcoholism is self-destruction. He's passed out at the reaping. He smells of vomit on the train. He's literally falling off the stage. But the reason it works long-term is that it's also a shield. A drunk is easy to underestimate. A drunk is safe to pity. If Snow's watching, Haymitch reads as broken, not plotting. That gives him room to move, to send sponsors at the exact right moment, to slip information to Plutarch, to nudge Katniss toward that nightlock stunt without looking like the architect. It's a performance that also happens to numb him. Convenient, horrifying, effective, and his relationships pay the price. He is cruel to Katniss and Peter in ways that feel personal, withholding, mocking, hitting Peter with brutal honesty about his odds. Is he training them or punishing them for daring to hope? He keeps other victors at arm's length, even the ones in on the rebellion. Johanna can rage, Finnick can flirt, but Haymitch stays slightly outside the circle, the man who knows everyone's secrets and never fully offers his own. There is a lot to uncover here, because the mentoring bond should be the one safe relationship a tribute has. Instead, with Haymitch, trust is a tool. He lies about plans, he manipulates emotions, he lets Katniss believe Peter might die if she doesn't play the star-crossed lover exactly right. Do the stakes of dismantling the games justify that level of emotional damage? Or to put it another way, if the system is monstrous, does that automatically make a necessary monster heroic? Snow thinks keeping Haymitch alive but broken is a win. The rebellion thinks weaponizing that brokenness is a necessity. You, as the viewer, are stuck in the middle, watching a man who has to hurt the people he's saving in order to save them at all. So when we call him more dangerous than any tribute, we also have to ask, more tragic than any of them too? Because the real danger might be what's left of him when the games finally end. Book versus movie Haymitch, how adaptation softens a weapon. And here's where the medium you meet Haymitch in really changes who you think he is. If you only know the films, you meet a drunk with good one-liners who occasionally turns the alcohol off and the strategy on. But here's the real question. What happens when you put that version next to the book Haymitch, the one the Capitol punishes by explicitly murdering his mother, his little brother, and his girlfriend for how he won? That part matters because it reframes his entire relationship with the games. In the text, the Capitol isn't just annoyed he embarrassed them with a force field trick. They treat him as a system error that has to be corrected through terror. You're told, clearly, that his victory move has consequences so brutal they read as a warning to every future victor. Don't think, don't innovate, don't break our toy. The movies cut that. On screen, he's haunted, sure, but the personal executions are gone, and with them, a huge chunk of why he becomes this long-game assassin aimed at the games themselves. The same thing happens with his arena. On the page, we're going to cover the 50th games as a technical manual in how to break a system. Haymitch testing the force field with a thrown object, mapping the edge, weaponizing the rebound to kill the last career. The arena feels like a chessboard he slowly solves. In the films, that history is mostly exposition wallpaper. You're told he won a quarter Quell. You don't really see why the Capitol should have been terrified. And then there's his rebellion work. In the books, there is a lot to uncover here. Clearer hints that he's been coordinating with Plutarch and District 13 for years, moving tributes around the board, deciding who lives long before the arena starts. Katniss realizes he's been running a secret game under the official games. At face value, the movies keep the broad twist, but they sand down the planning. You get a handful of tight shots, a few loaded glances, and suddenly, surprise, rescue plan. So what does that do to audience perception? If you're movie only, Haymitch reads as a lovable mess who occasionally remembers he's smart. His manipulations of Katniss and Peter feel softer, framed as gruff, tough love instead of calculated pressure from someone prepared to sacrifice them if it means breaking the Capitol's code. You still feel the hurt, you just don't always see the knife. But the danger isn't gone. This is where we talk about the moments the films let the mask slip. The way he sobers instantly when strategy is on the table. How he reads the room in Catching Fire, steering alliances with Finnick, Johanna, and Beatty while pretending to be half checked out. You watch victors with lethal skill defer to him, and you have to ask, why do killers follow this man? Put it all together, and the pattern is clear. The closer you look, especially in the books, the more Haymitch stops being comic relief and starts feeling like the most dangerous constant the games have ever produced. So if the adaptation already feels sharp, with him dialed down, what happens when we go back to the arena that built him and watch exactly how he broke it? What if Snow had killed him? Panem without Haymitch's shadow. So let's pull the thread the capital never dared to. You go back to the end of the 50th, Haymitch standing in that blood-soaked arena, having just turned a force field into a murder weapon. What if, instead of punishing his family, Snow decides the martyr risk is worth it and quietly erases him too? At face value, that sounds cleaner for the capital. No troublesome victor, no living reminder that the arena has seams. But here's the real question. What does District 12 look like without Haymitch's shadow stretching over the next quarter century of games? You don't just lose a drunk in a big house. You lose the only person in that district who understands that the games are code, and code can be broken. In this timeline, every tribute from 12 after the 50th walks into the arena with a stylist, a prep team, and a mentor who barely knows where the sponsor button is. No one tells them which careers to avoid, which game makers favor spectacle over slow deaths, which allies are secretly useful. That part matters because mentoring is the capital's most underestimated weapon. It's also the only place a district can quietly push back. So jump to the 74th. Katniss volunteers. Peter is reaped, and there is no Haymitch waiting on the train with a bottle and a plan. Instead, they get a replacement victor who plays the role the capital expects. Polished, obedient, and strategically useless. No advice to work the angle with the star-crossed lovers. No reading of the sponsor audience. No whispered, "You call that a kiss," to turn a private relationship into a public lifeline. Without that, their games look very different. Peter's confession about loving Katniss lands as a tragic crush, not a narrative strategy. Sponsors drift to flashier tributes. When Katniss blows up the careers food, there's no coordinated sponsor push to get her medicine. A bad infection, one unlucky cannon, and both of them probably die mid-games. Anonymous district fodder instead of a symbol of hope. And the 75th quarter Quell, this is where we talk about systemic consequences. Without years of Haymitch building quiet relationships, there's no alliance web of victors ready to flip. No history with Finnick, Beatty, or Johanna that tells them, trust the girl on fire. Most importantly, no connection to Plutarch Heavensby. The arena still spins, the force field still hums, but no one is aiming Katniss at it. Could someone else have stepped into that role? Finnick has charisma and capital access, but his leash is shorter. His family is weaponized against him. Beatty has the brain, but not the district mentor position that lets him shape tributes year after year. Johanna is volatile by design. There is a lot to uncover here, but the pattern is clear. No one else has Haymitch's exact relationship to the system, traumatized enough to hate it, smart enough to map it, positioned perfectly to quietly sabotage it. So when you strip him out of the board, you don't just lose a mentor, you lose the strategist who turns a symbol into a revolution. The rebellion doesn't just need a mockingjay, it needs the man who spent decades feeding her the right moves, the right allies, the right questions. Which raises one more problem Snow never solves. If your most dangerous piece is also your most broken, how long can you count on him before he breaks the board? And you, with it. Why Haymitch was more dangerous than any tribute pulling the threads together. So when you zoom out, what actually makes Haymitch the most dangerous person in this story? Not the axe, not the knives. It's that he figures out the operating system of the games and spends the rest of his life quietly corrupting it. At face value, the 50th is just a bloodbath special. Double the tributes, double the horror. But here's the real question. Why does that arena end up producing the one victor who can't stop treating the games as a puzzle to be solved? Haymitch doesn't win because he's the strongest. He wins because he reverse engineers the force field, tests it, then weaponizes the capital's own tech to kill their golden career. That part matters because from that moment on, the games stop being sacred in his mind. They're code. Code can be broken, and he keeps breaking it. Decades of mentoring turn him into a one-man data archive. Every arena theme, every mutation pattern, every sponsor reaction when a tribute cries versus when a tribute rebels, he's watching. We're going to cover more of this in the next section, but you can already see the shape of it. Other victors survive their year. Haymitch studies the entire institution. While most tributes are fighting for their lives, he's quietly mapping the relationship between spectacle, fear, and hope. Then there's the fool, the drunk, the man you underestimate on purpose because it's easier than admitting he's terrifying. This is where we talk about psychological warfare. By leaning into the role of unreliable mentor, he lowers the capital's guard, disarms his own district, and keeps his enemies assuming incompetence. Who wastes surveillance resources on the man passed out in Victor's village? The answer is, not enough people. Compare that to a standard tribute. They kill bodies inside one arena, in 1 year, under rules they can't change. Haymitch kills the game's legitimacy across multiple quarter quells. He makes victory look rigged, safety look temporary, and the capital's control look glitchy. When he helps turn Katniss into a symbol in the 74th, and then coordinates the 75th's arena hack with Plutarch, he's not just saving one girl, he's deleting the promise that being a victor means the games are over. And only he could do it. Who else has first-hand quarter quell trauma, long-term mentorship experience, direct capital access, and nothing left to lose after Snow murders his family? That combination is unique. It's also volatile. He's dangerous to the capital, but he's also dangerous to Katniss and Peter, pushing them, withholding information, gambling with their lives in service of a bigger pattern they can't see. So when you reread or rewatch with this lens, Haymitch stops being background comic relief. He becomes the quiet architect, standing just off stage, nudging the set, so the whole thing eventually collapses. The real question going forward is not whether Haymitch is dangerous. It's whether Panem can survive the world he helps create once the games are gone. Your turn in the Victor's Village. Join the Haymitch debate. You've heard the case for Haymitch as the quiet architect, the pattern breaker, the man the games were never designed to contain. But here's the real question. Where do you put him on your personal Panem alignment chart? Is Haymitch a hero, an anti-hero, or a necessary monster the districts needed to survive the capital? When you look at the 50th games, the force field trick, the way he turns mentoring into long-term psychological warfare, does that feel noble to you, or just efficient? And if he isn't the most dangerous person in this story, who is? Snow with his roses, Coin with her freedom proposals, or someone quieter, operating in the gaps the narrative barely touches? This is where we talk about your version of Panem. In the comments, map it out. Do you see an alternate timeline where Haymitch never throws that piece of arena debris at the force field, never realizes the system can rebound on itself, and the rebellion never finds its Mockingjay? Or maybe your theory is that he did much more off-page, secret deals with Finnick, extra messages hidden in sponsor gifts, a different relationship with Plutarch than we see at face value. Be specific. What's your favorite Haymitch moment, that proves your case? Is it the way he instantly understands Katniss's bluff with the berries? Or that tiny brutal detail that the Capitol kills his entire family after his win because of one clever move? That part matters because it tells you exactly how dangerous they believed he was. On a reread, what small line, gesture, or throwaway mention suddenly feels like a loaded weapon once you know he's been feeding intel to the rebellion for years. And if you're still turning this over, we're going to cover more of the system he's fighting. If you want to see the other side of this chessboard, go from Haymitch's force field to Snow's. Check out the breakdown on President Snow's political strategy and why his entire regime runs on carefully measured hope and fear. Or follow the sponsor trail to Finnick's secrets and ask why a beautiful victor from a coastal district ends up as the Capitol's most compromised messenger. You can also stay inside the arena itself. The Quarter Quell design analysis pulls apart how each special games rewrites the rules, and why the second Haymitch turns the 50th into a system crash. Snow has to answer with the 75th. If Haymitch is the bug in the code, those videos are the patch notes. If you want more deep dives into Panem's hidden mechanics, the quiet victors, and the districts the cameras barely show, you can join our Victors Village here. Subscribe, hit the bell, or just stay tuned for the next train from 12. Because in the end, the Capitol taught the districts to fear the careers, the mutts, the arena itself. But they should have feared the drunk from 12.